by another former Leeds Trinity student. Stephen Rigley will tell you which year he studied here in a little while, a bit longer ago than Lauren and Felicity. But he's had a fabulous career path through regional newspapers, through a number of national newspapers, and he's now acting deputy editor of the Sunday Express. So please welcome Stephen Rigley.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's quite something to see so many of you here today as well. In my day, there certainly wasn't anything like this. I'd like to obviously thank Catherine and Lise for inviting me here today. It's something really special to be back here today. It is quite an amazing feeling, and it brought back a lot of happy memories coming back here, apart from the Poxy Hill, getting up here from the station, which unfortunately still hasn't changed since I graduated here back in 1996, which is, well, every time I think about that and doing the reminiscing before actually coming up here, it just made me feel like a completely old fart, frankly. I mean, 41 years old, but, I was there, fresh-faced, just thinking about, the future. And I distinctly remember the day of my interview before coming up here. It was one of those biting cold Yorkshire days that basically kind of a bit like today, really. When I get off the train at Horsforth, I'd looked on the map, thought, it's just a quick stroll up here to the college, forgetting the hill again. And basically, then, and it was just that all the memories just once again came flooding back. I remember thinking that my interviewer was a chap with a beard called John. I can't remember his surname. I've been trying to remember my brains from it for days. And I remember thinking how he could not have failed to have been impressed by these 2 cuttings I had from when I did work experience at the Nottingham Evening Post. But all he wanted to do was role play. So he basically took on the part of a disgusted woman housewife after when I'd banged on her door. And he sat there and went, "How could you do this? How can you do this?" And I remember thinking, God, this is bizarre. But he offered me a place, and the rest, they say, is history. So anyway, yeah, as Catherine kind of says, I'm the acting deputy editor of the Sunday Express. I've been doing the role now for 9 months. Previous to that, I was the news editor of the paper for 8 years. Before that, I worked on the Daily Star and the Daily Mail, and also worked on regional and local newspapers since graduating here. So for the next few minutes, I suppose I will rattle on about my time here, the industry when I started, and my views really on what's on the industry today. Though mostly I'm just going to probably just retell a few old stories, which I hope you'll find quite entertaining, really. They entertained me when I was part of them, and at the end of the day, journalism is basically storytelling. That's really what it is all about. So, yeah, so back in 1996, I was one of the 8 people who came as part of the first postgraduate print course. The facilities then were nothing like the equipment we see here today. I mean, only the brief glimpse around the corner, so something quite spectacular. We created a little paper then. We named it the West Riding Post, which had 4 sheets of paper that it made up on it. And it was based out in, I better be careful, I was being filmed, so a modular portable building, rather than porter cabin in case obviously that goes online, which we basically news edited, reported, subbed, and did ourselves, with lecturers' help, and it was great fun. I remember for the first time going to court, going to inquests, interviewing celebrities. I actually took part in a fun run round A Park with someone who was then known only as TV celebrity Jimmy Savile. Oh yeah, that was well before what we knew today. I attended a meeting where the formulation of a new political party was announced by Arthur Scargill, who was still probably one of the trickiest people I ever came across. That's even, with those I've interviewed today. And I remember taking the bus out to Otley to cover a village show, where while interviewing a winning farmer over his prize cow, it proceeded to shit all over the floor and splash all over me, prompting the farmer, after he'd finished killing himself laughing, to say it was nice to see a journalist on the other end of the shit. I remember my first time actually selling a story, which was, back in those days, there was a Leeds had a cycle race through the city centre. Forgive me, I'm not sure if it still goes on today. There was a guy called Max Chiandri, who was then part of the British team, who'd finished third, and he basically didn't turn up to the podium. So I tracked him down and actually asked him why he didn't turn up to the podium. And he basically gave me an interview, and I was able to sell for a cycling magazine for the princely sum of £30. They still have never sent me the cheque, but they did give me the byline, which I suppose at least is something, and it's still actually got one of the places in my cuttings today. But I think when I think back on my time here, there's one thing that probably is one of the things that really strikes an amazing memory is Euro 96. The actual French team actually trained on, forgive me, I'm not sure where, but one of the football pitches out the back there. It was the first time that you actually were seeing the England flags flying everywhere. It was quite an amazing spectacle. And after that, I got to go to a press conference. I interviewed a couple of the players. I even tried to speak French to one of them, badly, and interview some of the fans down the stadium. It was an amazing experience. I've since been to, I did sports news for a while, so I went to Grand Nationals, been to a World Cup, I went to Germany for 2006, been to Wimbledon, been to many great events, but an event like that on the home turf was something really special, and it's something that I will never forget. So yeah, I mean, you know, it was an absolutely fantastic time, and you know, it taught me a lot really about how to be journalists, stuff that is still very much relevant to me today, and to, you know, and into the general job of whether it be on a regional newspaper or the Sunday Express. I got my exams, I got my shorthand. It is still important. Even now with modern technology, you can't go to court with a tape. I mean, we all use tape and dictaphones, but you've still got to have your shorthand, and there isn't a reporter I've ever met who hasn't got his car full of pieces of receipts, beer mats, napkins with little bits of stories written on, which they just happen to be caught a story when they're out and about. It happens a lot, it really does. When it came to finding a job, at the end of it, I sent out, I think, around 40 applications. I don't know if that's normal today. I think I just basically just blitzed everywhere, and I ended up in Basingstoke. I probably couldn't have even found Basingstoke on a map before I actually went down there for my interview. But I basically went there, and this was in the days before email. There was no internet. And you basically, what you did, which is still a lot of, really, even with the new technology, which is still useful today, is you actually spoke to people. You actually went out and used the phone. You actually had to interview people. And one thing that it probably taught me is there is no such thing as a basic question, because you didn't have necessarily the information, the access to the ease of information with the internet. So obviously, depending on what happens with the Google ruling, still to come in a few months' time or whenever that is, but you only had your wits to about you, so you had to ask the questions. And it didn't matter if, you just needed to ask those, to get those details for the stories, whatever the stories were, whether it would be a flower show or whether it would be a major murder inquiry. It was good fun. It was good fun. It was good fun starting, and it also, the advantage of working on the local paper was the way it took to actually be part of a community and to work inside that community with something that we know is still loved to do today, which is campaigns and crusades. I mean, we do one on the Sunday Express, which we've led the way about better mental health care, which is something that is very important to us. And, you know, I mean, we've had meetings with people like Nick Clegg about it, and you know, now we're very, very pleased that all the main parties have put in their manifestos a commitment to better mental health care for the election, which is something that we're absolutely thrilled about. But I remember my first campaign, which was about home care cuts for the elderly in Hampshire. And every day I would phone the leader of the council and the leader of the social services committee to try and get him to explain why they were cutting them. He refused to answer my questions. So the editor came up with a great idea let's put his home phone numbers in the paper and let the readers speak to him. It got inundated. I remember not long after that, we found out that Tony Blair was down at a hospital nearby. So I ended up running through this hospital to get the new Prime Minister, Tony Blair, to answer questions on home care in Hampshire. Great fun. And it got it overturned. I can still remember the old dear whose name basically sparked it. Oh, was this old dear Kathleen Saunders. I mean, she's probably not with us anymore. I mean, she was late 80s even back then. And I remember going round to her house to tell her that the decision on home care cuts had been reversed and she would get her home care back, and she just looked at me and this mischievous little laugh went, "We won, didn't we?" And that was a really great feeling. And that, in a way, is what, you know, sort of like the campaigns. And it is great to be able to do things which benefit communities and benefit people, which is a lot of also what this is about. What this is about and what, you know, what journalism is with us today. I suppose I arrived on what was called Fleet Street, you know, what has been called Fleet Street as the national press, in 2001, when I got my first shifts on the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail back then had, you know, a lot of the big historical beasts were still there. I mean, Nigel Dempster, Linda Lee Potter. It was an imposing place, but also it was probably the first time you'd see the real access of information that has multiplied through to today, really, where every desk had internet access. Every desk had email access, which was quick and sharp. Before then, we didn't have emails, really. You would see faxes buzzing continuously in newsrooms. You see, most of the ambitious young reporters, they'd be waiting by the fax to try and see what the first good story to come in so they could get their teeth into. And they had also a very, very good proper library system. I mean, the Daily Mail library back in those days had, I think, about 12 people in there, and you would go in and they would say, I remember going there once to ask for the name of the 6th British soldier killed in Northern Ireland, and they went, piece of piss, went away and came back in 2 minutes later with the name, address, and all the details of them. It was very impressive. I suppose now, really, but the central lessons from starting journalism were still true, even going back there to the Mail in those days, is that it's other people's stories. You're kind of a mouthpiece. It's asking the questions and just doing great fun, because it's a fantastic thing to do. I mean, there were a lot of great events. I'll never forget the moment me and a photographer were fronting up a terrorist in Maida Vale. And basically the guy came out of his flat and launched at the photographer, basically, and there ended up people coming out of all the streets while this wanted terrorist was there trying to grab this camera. And it was just one of those most amazing, it was kind of like a very bad 70s comedy scene. I remember there being chased down Nick Faldo's drive. It was just surreal incidences. But it was also a great time, and you learn a lot. You learn a lot how the industry is, really, and the great, you know, and the great fun that it has. I mean, the national press today is probably even different to what it was back in 2001. I mean, Leveson and the closure of the News of the World affected things. Though I certainly believe from where I see today that things are, I won't say getting back to what they were before, but the central presence of storytelling and the central almost confidence of journalists is coming back again, which I think is a good thing. I mean, certainly where I'm concerned, what my view on the hacking situation, for what it's worth, is that the law on hacking was there beforehand, and the people concerned have been severely punished. And also, where it comes to the Elvedon inquiry, in a civilised society, the freedom of the press is a fundamental right, and I know of journalists where police have actually gone through their teenage daughter's underwear drawer looking for evidence. That, to me, is not right. But we do sort of like, we do face greater barriers than we did when we started. Privacy legislation is here. The Bribery Act is here, and data protection is around the corner, depending on the outcome of what happened with Max Mosley and Google. And also the industry is evolving. When I start, the internet is now very much with us, and internet journalism is very much with us. And 24 rolling news is now totally different to what it was back in those days. All the media groups are now striving to make the internet work. Mail Online, which is probably the benchmark, has now broken America, which I know the Americans really hate. The Telegraph, I think digital first. Whether that's right or not, that's an issue for them. But it's certainly very popular with them, and the Telegraph is a great product. We've got our digital strategy. I know also the Mirror have, News UK obviously have, with the paywall for the Sun, and it's all going quite well. But I believe that even with the new technology, old-fashioned storytelling still is the benchmark of it all. I remember a few years ago doing a talk to a class. These GCSE students are much younger than you guys. Basically, beforehand, the teacher came up to me and asked if I could explain, I think it was something like Anderson's theory of a front-page story. I said, I don't know what it is. To me, it was always a fuck me Doris. It was something that if you had two people together, it would be, fuck me Doris, have you seen that story in the Sunday Express? That's all about. It's about just stories that people want to hear, and just telling tales, and telling stories. And on the Sunday Express over the years, I've been lucky to work on some, frankly, really good ones. The best one, if I could go back to a very dull Wednesday afternoon in 2009, I was news editing the paper. It was a really boring afternoon, and I was trying to get out of doing my forward planning by flicking around the channels on the TV, when two of my reporters came up to my face with massive grins all over their face. Think Zippy, it was that sort of big. And basically, they'd been going through a disc that we had of the expenses of 5 members of Parliament. And in there was the dynamite information that the then Home Secretary, Jackie Smith, had claimed porn on her expenses. I just remember sitting there, and they just kept going through, and they were just saying, oh, right, we've checked it out with Virgin. These 2 films, they're adult films, they're X-rated. I just kept saying there and going, porn, porn, porn. And they were like, yeah, here's the proof. Yep, we got the proof. And then you have, for a news editor, the greatest moment there can be, which is there's the editor's office around the corner, and you get there. Martin, have you got a quick second? We got a good one. And that obviously then set in place the stories that in the end brought about the MP's expenses scandal, which is still, I believe, the best story I ever worked on. We broke a great one last year about Prince Andrew being held at gunpoint by armed police in Buckingham Palace Gardens. That was fun. That was one that came through on a Thursday afternoon. We just got, with the words, the royal editor came over with it, you're not going to believe this. They actually, and he was there going, don't you know who I am? We've broken serious stories. I noticed one of the papers today about the Barrow Hospital scandal. My health editor came up to me after she had a tip that needed investigating, went up to Barrow, spoke to some of the families, and then we were able to uncover what I think is one of the biggest scandals in the NHS in recent years, which is something that I like to think I'm rightly proud of. And I remember another case where I had a reporter in Los Angeles who always could sound so enthusiastic, no matter whatever time of day it was. So you'd even phone him up at 3:30 in the morning, he'd be like, morning, how you doing? And when he came over, he had the whitest teeth I've ever seen. And he just went up and goes, Stephen, I've got a great one for you. I was like, okay, Mike, what is it? And he goes, I've just actually managed to uncover who did the Limburg baby kidnap. You're like, what? And it turned out there was a couple of Russian emigres. And he actually got it, he got it all banked up, got all the proof. That one went around the world, that was a lot of satisfaction in that sort of breaking stories. Because it's great fun breaking stories, it really is. And And I love doing it. I still do, even after 20 odd years in this game. In fact, I could probably rattle on for ages about other stories, but I probably ought to. One thing that I'd love to say is my best ever Fleet Street story. It's not for myself, it's not one of my, but it's an anecdote, which I just think is fantastic. It's now part of Fleet Street legend, which was back in the late 70s. There was reports of a plane crash in the Italian Alps. The only people who got it were the night news desk of the Daily Express, who basically heard about this and then found out that they had a sports reporter in Turin following Leeds United. They managed to track him down to some bar in the middle of Turin and then basically dispatched him up to the scene. Tired and emotional and barely able to walk, he hails a taxi right up into the Italian Alps, where he stumbles out the taxi and starts trudging through a forest trying to get close to where this plane crash was. Before basically he's kind of too drunk, so he falls over in the snow, where unconscious he is found by the Italian authorities, who believed they had uncovered a survivor. Took him off to hospital. This excitement was more than matched by news desks back in London on hearing not only was there a survivor of this plane crash, he was British to boot. Reams of journalists going across to Italy, so much that the Italians actually put on a press conference and wheel out a drunken sports reporter. True story, as all the best ones are. Now I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Sorry, we spoke about an incident involving Nick Faldo chasing you down. Can you just go into that for us?
It wasn't actually Faldo himself. It was one of his aides. It was he was getting married at the time to, God, forgive me, I can't recall which one of his wives it was. Basically, I'd got the details of what his wedding was going to be by just asking around, because they put in a planning application for his gardens to turn them into a wedding marquee. And I went up the drive to basically ask for Nick Faldo for his comments. And someone answered the door and went, "I'm not talking to the press," and chased me down the drive. Which was a bit like, oh, right, okay, fair enough. So that's a no comment then. So yeah, that was a fun day. Yeah, hi.
I'm just looking at your pages behind you, and it says web error exposed jihadi job. I just wondered, when the name of the jihadi job was unveiled, did you have to have a discussion in the newsroom as to whether you keep using the moniker or not? Because I suppose it maybe creates a kudos in some ways.
Yeah.
Discussion you had, because it's very catchy. So.
Yeah. For us, to be honest, we didn't. I think we probably would have done had it happened on a Saturday. I mean, for us, it was a case of that. I mean, the Jihadi John was amassed on Thursday afternoon, I think, if I remember right, when Washington, because it came out of Washington, got it, and then everyone started following up. So I think for us, by the time it was kept on by the Mail, the Daily Express, the Telegraph, so then we just all, frankly, fell into line. On a Saturday, maybe we would have had that discussion. Well, I'm sure we would have had that discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
With this sort of increasing move online, and you said that all papers have their own different strategies, are print journalists having to adapt and
Yes.
change their skill sets?
I wouldn't say change their skill sets, because I honestly believe that the case is still storytelling. But there's certain things that you are having to change. I mean, social media is obviously now absolutely ginormous. There's most journalists now are on Twitter. In a case now where for example, someone like people who are on the Telegraph journalists will tweet stories first before they put them online, and then leaving the paper almost third really in the list. So yeah, you're having to add skill sets rather than necessarily change them. So you still got your basic journalism and your basic journalism platform, which hasn't changed, and then you're just adding new things to it really. Yeah.
Do you think the Mail's so popular because it's slightly controversial
Personally, no. I think the Mail is very, very popular because what it does very well is, in my opinion, it does the day's news brilliantly. It doesn't necessarily look, I mean, I'm sure people from the Mail would disagree with me if they're doing with it about breaking exclusive, and they had, frankly, a stonker this morning. But what they do is they'll do that day's news agenda, and they'll do it fantastically. I mean, I remember when I was there, they would send you on door knocks, which at the time you thought, this is pointless. But you were doing like, I remember doing one, I remember one story that was there when I was on the Mail was Damilola Taylor, the horrible murder of the guy down in southeast London. And I was backgrounding on it, and I had a list of names that I had to door knock, people who'd only briefly came into contact with the people concerned. But the theory was, well, maybe someone just knows something. So from that, it means that they get the best picture and they're very, very full. And they throw resources at news stories brilliantly. As for their tone, I think it's mostly that they do the journalism brilliantly. Yeah.
This might be a really stupid question to ask, but...
There's no such thing as a stupid question, mate.
I was thinking about, because you work for the Sunday Express, I was wondering if there's a difference in approach between reporting on a daily publication and a Sunday publication.
Very much so. Very much so. On a Sunday paper, you have to... One of the biggest things that is a concern over the course of a week is keeping your stories secret, keeping your stories private. There is nothing more annoying than basically you've got your property, your story, and you've had it for, say, it could be even a month, and then it leaks out on the Thursday and it turns up in the Mail or the Sun or the Telegraph or wherever. So you have to, almost boxing off your stories is a key part of the job for a Sunday. Because Sunday newspapers are very, very different. I mean, one of the things that the market has changed in recent years is that traditionally in the past, Sunday was a day of big reads. But now, in many respects, Saturday has become a new Sunday because lifestyles of people have changed. So weekend papers on Saturdays and Sundays have got bigger and got fatter and got much more to read in it, much more supplements, magazines. So yeah, it's a different, because on a daily paper it's about getting it out. Your time pressures are there and fast and fast and fast. On a Sunday it's a lot more protecting stories and working stories up and making sure that it's going to work for the weekend, because you've only got one day at it, so it's got to be good.
Linked to that, can you tell us of any extreme measures you've taken to keep Mr. Horry's secret?
We've had people in hotels. In those days, there used to be tricks of, you would see, if people found out that who was staying in their hotels, then you would have people from other publications might try and set the fire alarm off to try and get the people out the hotels. That was an old trick that was used a few times in those days. I think basically you would put people in hotels if it was a buy-up. You'd obviously put people under contract if you're doing a particular interview, like we did. One we did a few weeks ago, we had an interview with Craig Charles. So we put him under contract, when he was to talk about his life in the jungle and basically Coronation Street and the death of his brother. We did one a few years back with Wendy Richard as well, when she was revealing a cancer battle. So contracts are very part of it. As for other individual stories, a lot comes down to your personal relationship with the person who you're talking to, and to a degree your art of persuasion. Because you try and say to, don't talk to anyone else. It's difficult if it's a pack story. Fortunately, we haven't had what I think of as a big journalism pack job probably in about 3 or 4 years now. I mean, the last one I can really recall was the Joanna Yates murder in Bristol, which was when there was a lot of journalists in the town trying to find out information. But fortunately, touch wood, there hasn't been that sort of job in many years. Long may that continue. Yeah.
Is keeping stories secret more difficult in the age of the internet?
Oh, a lot more difficult, yeah. Citizen journalism is, we probably saw it first with the tsunami. And citizen journalism is very good in many respects, because we had one that I recall is the Haute de la Garenne case in Jersey, which was obviously the child abuse before, with Jimmy Savile and various other bits and pieces. To get reporters to Jersey is logistically difficult. And by the time you get across there, you're a day or two late, while social media then is already starting the story and the ball is rolling. So social media can help you get the stories. But citizen journalism, as you say, if you've got something under protection, it can get difficult. That it can leak out that you are trying to do this. I know the Sun had problems with that. Yeah.
My question kind of follows on from that, because there's so much information around in social media and things now, and there's a lot of false information all over Facebook. What do you have to say about that, how it affects?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of really that sort of stuff is going back before Leveson, before a lot of this all happened. There was the super injunctions, where you would have a star or a person would basically have a court ruling that you would not be able to say what the ruling was about or who this particular star was. These information was freely available on Twitter. Journalists knew what they were. So you would have yourself being asked, oh right, so footballer X is accused of so-and-so. Who is that footballer? And you couldn't say, because you were being in very strict liability to mention their names. That was obviously before things changed, but that was a major problem. So you were being used to almost stand up a story. And then obviously, where the footballer concerned, it came out that it was Ryan Giggs. You have to basically spend much more time checking. You have to be thorough. The central thing of thoroughness is still very much there, which is good. I mean, you've got to fact check.
When you're employing staff, where are you taking staff from? Are there people who work on local papers? And what sort of things are you looking for, journalism staff?
Yeah, determination, guts, hard work, confidence, knowing the basics, knowing how to basically report, knowing how to do. You want people who basically, I personally prefer people who've come through either local newspapers, regional newspapers, or agencies. I personally think that's important. When I've hired people for the Sunday Express, they've come through that route, because I think that you need to know the basics and the building blocks before. I think you need to walk before you can run.
With this recent thing with HSBC and the Telegraph, what happened to Guardian, in reality, on a day-to-day basis, bear in mind we're on the live stream here. On a day-to-day basis, just how do you walk that fine line between trying to achieve commercial success and satisfying readership?
I suppose really, when it comes to satisfying your readership, you hope they're satisfied. We have sales figures come out every day. You look at them intently. You look to see what works, what doesn't. You look to see are the people interested in where error exposed jihadi John? Do the people care about that? Do the public interested? Are people interested in the Capital One Cup final? You know, there was an argument in the newspaper, is it too London? Journalism is an art, not science. So to actually, you know, to answer your question about the readership, I suppose it's experience and gut feeling, really. As for the HSBC issue, I don't really know what issues went on in the Telegraph, to be honest, so I can't really comment on that one. I haven't spoken to anyone over there to know enough.
Have you ever felt pressure from an advertiser? Or
Personally?
Direct or indirect?
No, I never have. I don't know if others have, but I certainly haven't.
Question. A lot of the speakers this week have talked about the importance of knowing the audience and reacting to the way the audience are reacting to stories. So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you're using that interaction in your job.
You get letters. Obviously, we still get the letters and the emails. Like, for example, last week we tried an experiment in the paper of, I don't know how many people here are interested in horse racing, but we decided that for the Sunday paper that Sunday racing is traditionally not very good. So we thought, let's take the race cards out and give a bigger experiment to a tipping service. Cheltenham obviously is next week, so let's try it. We got complaints. So this week we're putting the race cards back. You know, personally I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, you're listening to your readers. The editor makes sure he reads all the letters every week. We get phone calls. I mean, one thing that I think is much better in the newspaper industry than it was when I started is the customer service. In the past, if you had a reader phone up, you know, you would probably, frankly, yeah them. You know, you'd almost be like, oh God, we've got a reader call. But now you're much more like, okay, well, how can I help? What can I do to help you? You know, what do you think about the paper? You know, you're wanting to listen to the readers more because you value them much more, because obviously sales matter, and you don't want to lose a reader, and we don't want to lose any readers, and I don't think any paper wants to lose any readers.
I've got to meet the next speaker, but I want to ask, do you play Express Bingo?
I don't myself. Should I?
Have you seen it on there?
Yeah. No, I don't actually. I probably
Three
should.
or a different paper. It's too cheeky as we go out.
You mentioned that you were talking about web policies earlier, obviously they're now having such an excellent website and they're great in America, and the Telegraph going digital first. And you said we have our web policy, but you didn't really go into that. I'm just interested in really.
Well, they've just actually expanded it. You're right, I didn't really go into it, did I? Probably should. Well, they've just actually expanded it. What they're trying to do now, because with our web policy, is to our situation is we don't have, like, say, the Telegraph where it is all as one, or the Mail and the Mail Online, which is very, very different. What we're trying to do with ours, and particularly the Sunday Express, is videos are very, very crucial. A lot of what it is about keeping people on that particular web page, frankly, for as long as you can. Because the longer you can keep them, the more they're going to read. So where something that we're very keen on is if reporters go out on the road, which we want them, as well as basically doing a reporting job, idea to do a video as well. It can just be a video blog. Some of them are very good at it, particularly if it's a specialist. Like, I mean, if we've got, say, I don't know, a particular royal editor, say, or a TV editor, or whatever, you know, they could maybe then give their opinions on, I don't know, Broadchurch or whatever, or, you know, the latest thing for Prince William, and about making, basically, to giving a more rounded package. A couple of weeks ago, we went to Switzerland, where we were investigating a euthanasia clinic. And while we were there, the reporter did a video interview with the organisers of this clinic, which we did for the internet. So it makes basically doing stuff all in the round. So you read about it and you can look at it online, you can do more online. So that's what we're trying to do, really. It's much more trying to keep pace with the new technology. So that while, I mean, our website is the fastest growing, which is great. But then to actually keep that growing and to actually keep those with videos, and we had Alistair Campbell doing one for us last week, and celebrity interviews. So the more of that we're trying to do, the merrier, basically.
How often do you get to watch Sheffield Wednesday?
I suppose not often enough is the honest answer, but whether once is often enough. I went to see us at Millwall a couple of weeks back. That was great because we won. Obviously on a Saturday, I'm at work. So, and I don't see, I haven't been to Hillsborough in, God, far too long. Far too long, really. Probably must be 3 or 4 years now. So, my missus, I was actually going to take her to a game a couple of years back. I actually got tickets to see Cup replay at Milton Keynes. But quite conveniently, she actually got hit by a cycle on the way to going home. So, and she was like, oh, that's an omen, so she'll never go and watch Wednesday again. Which probably spares her 30 or 40 years of absolute agony and heartache that I've been through.
I wonder if you might just tell us a little bit about how you're preparing coverage for the general election.
Yeah, well, we have started it. We've started the planning. What we're doing is we're doing some interviews with key figures of all the major parties to run into now for magazines, and basically preparing for Purda. Because you've got the budget, I think it's the week after next. I may be wrong on that, just before Parliament breaks up. Then we've now got all the accreditation for the battle buses lined up, and we will have reporters with the 4 parties now, obviously because of UKIP as well. So we will be around all 4 parties. We will be there with the party leaders and being at all the election counts. The time which for a Sunday paper will get very busy is depending on what the result is on the Thursday night. Your guess is as good as mine what that will be. But we're trying to put ourselves in place so that we've got all our key people in place as if there's any deals that are struck, to be in the Rose Garden like last time, to be with Nigel Farage, with Ed Miliband, with Nick Clegg, to where they're all going to be in those particular times. I mean, the parties are pretty good at giving you this sort of detail and information. We will do polls. We've got opinion poll on standby, ready for when we want to do them. We will do basically like the bellwether seats, because as we know, basically where it comes to elections, there's probably 60 or 70 seats that really decide it. I mean, I know my seat, basically where I live in Hertfordshire, the Tory will win. There's certain seats where the Labour will win. It's just the way it is. So, to be in the bellwether seats to make sure that you've got the right reading. So that's basically the plans as we...
And do you think there are any particular challenges this time around in covering the campaign?
I think a lot is, the last election was so very different to anything we've had before because of the TV debates, which skewed everything. We've never seen, it's an argument, one I must admit I believe in, that meant we had a coalition, because I think that allowed Clegg in. Others may differ from that, that's just my personal view. I think that we don't necessarily know what the actual aftermath of that will be. We don't know yet how big UKIP will get. We don't know yet how big UKIP will get in their target seats, so that's one of the unknowns. The Greens are all an unknown. It's a difficult one to call, but that makes it exciting.
Will the Sunday Express be supporting any particular party?
I think that's a decision probably for further up the tree than, you know, I don't know what conversation's been had between the editor and the proprietor and various things like that.
Something they've traditionally done?
Traditionally, at the last election, we supported the Conservatives. What's going to happen this time round?
Is it likely to be UKIP, do you think?
Don't know. I honestly, I think there's a long way to go before the election, and as I say, I mean, you know, I don't know what conversations are had really regarding that.
I keep putting my hand up.
That's all right.
At the last election, I remember that The Guardian did a very open debate amongst its staff and involved its readers about who they should back. Is that the kind of thing that the Sunday Express would ever do, or will it be a sort of fairly closed decision?
I think that basically from what, I think a lot of what our readers tell us, and you know, we do sort of like see obviously readers' letters and what the readers think and the way they vote in the vote lines, which goes back to a earlier point, which we do monitor. Our readers tell us basically what they just really don't want is Ed Miliband. They dread the thought of Ed Miliband. So, and in answer to your question as well, I suspect more whether it will be Conservative, whether it be UKIP, whether it be anything, it will not be Ed Miliband. I think we would rather basically, frankly, eat our own shoes than back Ed Miliband. Right.
Any other questions? No?
It's about the apology for the Madeleine McCann.
Oh, right, yeah.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise.
When you do have to retract something or you do have to make an apology, how does that sort of feel as something that you know you have to put your hands up and admit to the world that you were wrong on an occasion?
Honestly, shit. You don't, but on the other hand, if you're wrong, you should own up to it. No one likes being wrong, but no one likes being wrong, but if you are wrong, then you should apologise for it and you should basically correct stuff. I mean, with Ipsos now, we're seeing, you know, that newspapers do make corrections. You know, there isn't a newspaper or news organisation or media organisation on planet Earth that hasn't made mistakes at all over the years. You know, I'm not necessarily commenting on the one, but just in general. So, you know, no one likes doing it, but if you are wrong, then yeah, you should correct it.
Following that, then, what?
Excuse me.
Was there like an institutional failure then by the paper that led to, you know, what happened basically?
What on the McCann story? I wouldn't say there was on the Sunday Express. I wouldn't say there was there at all, really. I can't really comment on other papers in the group because I don't know enough about what was going on there.